It's Larry Red. Reads. It's me. I'm back. I know many of you have missed me dearly. Um, Thought about me, day in, day out. When is Larry Red going to make his triumphant return? And I have good news. Today is the day. I haven't made a video in a very long time, and this is not because I didn't want to. It's because I don't know. Let me think of an excuse. I'll get back to you. Um, but anyways, I am back. I haven't made a video in a very long time, and I apologize to myself mostly because, who really watches these? But anyways, I'm back today with a real good video, I hope, because it's about one of my favorite books. Um, well, now it's one of my favorite books. I finished it about a week ago, or about 2 weeks ago now, when I had the deadly coronavirus. Really, it was like a fever dream, this book. Not just because of the coronavirus, but because of the contents of the book itself. And that book is Infinite Jest. It used to have a cover, and I sort of wasn't a very good owner of this book. It was lent to me by a friend of mine, Jerry Blue. You may know him. So I apologize to Jerry Blue for ruining his book. It didn't come to me in the best of circumstances, but it is left in an even worse shape. Anyways, let's talk about this book. As you can note, it's very large. 1,079 pages exactly. And 100 of those are like footnotes. So that's one thing you got to know about this book. There are footnotes. You'll sort of be flipping back and forth because the footnotes, most of them, are important, and you should read them. The story is very nonlinear, and some of the story is told in footnotes. So let's talk about why I love this book so much. I think the biggest part of it is it's just entertaining. The book is about entertainment. The book is about, what entertainment means in our society. At least that's what I've been told by people who are much smarter than me, and I did sort of understand that. The book it has a lot to do, I mean, with movies and images and entertainment in general. And the book does not fail on that front. It is probably the most entertaining book I have read because there are so many stories sort of packed into it. Um, there's sort of three, four-ish main sort of plot lines, but like there are probably like 100 stories that you could sort of pick out and isolate in this book that you wouldn't even need to understand anything else in the book to sort of get something out of, which is really, really cool. But the main stories all sort of center around the city of Enfield, Massachusetts, which is like part of the Boston metro area. There's the Enfield Tennis Academy and this like halfway house, the Enfield House for House for Substance and Abuse House or something. It has a goofy name, but the Enfield Tennis Academy is where our sort of main protagonist comes in. The book is narrated mostly, like 90%, 95% even in third person, but there are some sort of scenes where it's written from Hal's perspective, like in first person. Like the first book of the first words of the book are, "I am seated in an office surrounded by heads and bodies," which I'm told is by, part of the lyrics from a song by 1975. Not really a band I follow, but anyways, Halen Candenza is a like linguistic prodigy, but he's also a tennis prodigy. He's about 17 years old throughout most of the book, which takes place in the year of the dependent undergarment. I'll let you sort of figure out what that means if you decide to read the book. This is a very funny book. So Halen Candenza is this sort of tennis prodigy at this Enfield Tennis Academy, which was sort of created, not sort of, was created by his father. And his father is James Candenza, who is a optician. He, studied the physics of light, and then also created this tennis academy, and also, super importantly, was a filmmaker, sort of, I think it's called in the book, like après-garde instead of avant-garde, just sort of like a filmmaker who sort of makes fun of stuff and things like that. But one of his films is key to the book, and that film is Infinite Jest, either Infinite Jest 5 or Infinite Jest 6. And this film is so important because it really takes a center plot that sort of ties a lot of things together. It's film that is so entertaining, so unbelievably entertaining that you cannot stop watching it. Once you watch it, you sort of are entranced by it. You cannot think of anything. You don't even want to eat or sleep, and you basically die of exposure in your own excrement, in all likelihood, because this film is so entertaining. And when someone doesn't know where you are, they call for help. They call the police, and the police, if you catch even a frame of the film, they become entranced as well. So this film is being sort of used as a weapon by various terrorist groups, really just or Quebecois terrorists. It's a lot of this book has to do with Quebecois stuff. It's really, really interesting and funny. So there's that part of the book. Then sort of investigating the and sort of trying to get their hands on this uh, weapon slash movie is Hugh Steepley, who works for the Bureau of Unspecified Services in the U.S. government that is sort of morphed into containing uh, Canada and Mexico and the so-called ONAN Organization of North American Nations. It's very complicated. You got to read the book. It's very interesting, kind of goofy stuff. And then there's also this sort of member of this Quebecois terrorist group called the AFR, or let me see if I can remember my French, Association Fêteur Roulant, which means like wheelchair assassins. It's a group of Quebecois people who are all in wheelchairs, but they're these very successful terrorists. So it involves Remy Marath, who's a member of that AFR. And then, of course, there's this other plot that's sort of going on that's connected through Joelle Van Dien, who's another character in the book, who dated Hal's brother and was a star in many of the movies. And she sort of gets involved with this halfway house and this halfway house in Enfield. A big part of that halfway house is Don Gately, another key character. There are so many characters in this book. That's what makes it so rich and just fun to read. And Don Gately is a former burglar and sort of recovering Demerol addict. And a lot of this book goes really deep into like addiction and depression and sort of what goes along with that. I'm not a person who's like been addicted to drugs or alcohol. I don't really do that stuff. I'm only 20 after all. I do enjoy bubble tea from time to time. But even if you've never been like, addicted to stuff or never gone to AA or Narcotics Anonymous, a lot of this book is about like 12-step programs. Um, you can really sort of get a lot from like the discussions of addiction that are super interesting, the discussions of depression that a lot of the characters go through. So yeah, I mean, this book is just super interesting, super funny. There's so many stories within stories. I guess maybe I'll talk about a few of my favorite things from this book that really just like caught my eye. They're not like spoilers, I don't think, but just sort of stuff in this world that Foster Wallace builds that just like enrich it so much. Um, I guess before I do that, I'll talk about some of the characters I love. There's Hal. There's his mother, who's a very important character. She's just like sort of this beautiful, tall Quebecois woman. There's Hal's older brother, Oren Incandenza, who's a punter for the Arizona Cardinals. He's a very fun character. There's Hal's the youngest of three. There's Hal's middle child, brother Mario Incandenza, who's like sort of he has like a disability, but he's like sort of like the sweetest, most like lovable character that you'll ever meet. There's of course Hal's father, James Incandenza, and all that goes along with him. There's a lot of great characters at the tennis academy. Jim Troeltsch is one of my favorites. He is like a he's not going to make it to the show, as they say in the book. He's not going to be a professional tennis player. He wants to be sort of a commentator, and he goes around basically like commentating over everything whenever something's going on. He like becomes like a news reporter, and it's just really, really funny. There's Michael Pemulus, who is a friend of Hal's, tennis player, who sort of is a very fun character in the book. Super good at math. There's like a whole footnote. Let me see if I can find it, where it's like Pemulus explaining the mean value theorem, which is as a fan of mathematics myself, was very funny. Like I said, like these like what's it called? Footnotes are super long. Like they'll just go on for a very uh long time. Like here's the one about the mean value theorem. The mean value theorem for integrals in this case. But yeah, there's super funny things. Just so many goofy things in this book. Like you read some of Hal's like old essays from his entertainment class. Entertainment, like I said, is like probably one of the biggest parts of this book. Um, there's so many great characters, so many interesting like sort of AA sort of adjacent style groups. It's particularly one that I find interesting is UHID, the Union for the hideously wait, what is oh my god. What does UHID stand for? But The Union of the Hideously and Improbably Deformed. The Union of the Hideously and Improbably Deformed, which is like this group where of people who are, just too ugly to sort of exist, and they sort of take reins of their own power by wearing a veil throughout life because, they always feel that people are looking at them. I don't know. The reasoning is sort of goofy, but there's a lot of funny things. Like here's another footnote. Uh, the Saprogenic Greetings Company. There's somehow there's a character who's a friend of James Oren and Candenza who owns like a greeting cards business, and their tagline is "When you care enough to let a professional say it for you." Saprogenic Greetings, which is I don't know. There's just so many very 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 funny things in this book. There's the whole like Johnny Gentle administration, which is the president in this book, who is like a former singer and he's like a huge germaphobe. Like he goes everywhere and is terrified of germs. Um, a lot of this book is about like advertising and like how entertainment has changed, and he sort of predicts a lot of stuff. Like it, the entertainment in the book is through a company called like Interlace, which I feel like is kind of like a prediction of Netflix in a way, where it's like you can get these like cartridges mailed to you and like sort of streamed to you through like a computer as well. But yeah, so it's basically a book about a world with like so much entertainment that it makes the world sort of like you're just overwhelmed with entertainment. You're overwhelmed with sort of stimulus. And a lot of the book is about that. Like there's a lot of the some of my favorite parts of the books is there's conversations between Remy Marath and Marath and Hugh Steepley, who is undercover as Helen Steepley, trying to find stuff out about that movie, that terrorist entertainment sort of product. And Remy is a member of the AFR, but he's like sort of maybe a double, quadruple, triple agent for reasons that the book gets into. And there's a lot of great scenes with them sitting on a mountaintop in Tempe, Arizona, just sort of, or Tucson, Arizona, just sort of talking about things. And there's a great scene where Remy is and Hugh are discussing like a experiment from like the 50s or something where you could basically they were able to connect into your like neural pathways, some doctor was, and could give you basically like infinite pleasure. And the story was that like a lot of people, like when they found out about this, and the pleasure would be like so crazy that like you would stop doing anything, much like the entertainment that the book talks about. But the pleasure would be so much that you would just sort of stop wanting to do anything. And it talked about like how a lot of people wanted to experience that, even knowing the consequences. So that's a really interesting part of the book. Their conversations are super fun. There's just so many things that you I could talk about in this book. I know it's a hard book to read. It's very nonlinear. It's very confusing at first. I'd say like the first 100 pages are really difficult to get through if you've never read anything like this. I would definitely have like a phone or a dictionary with you to look things up. There's no shame in that. And then the ending is also very kind of confusing. I didn't really totally understand what was going on when I finished it. The book sort of ends very abruptly. But there is like an ending. It just sort of, I think Foster Wallace explained that it takes place off the page, which is kind of an interesting way to end the book. Like it sort of wraps back around, and you can go back to some of the stuff in the beginning that sort of explains some of the stuff in the end that wouldn't have made sense when you first read it. So stuff like that. I think one thing that I read that really cleared things up, and when I read it, I was like, mind blown. It made me like the book even more because it just sort of explains like everything. Like there, I think Wallace explained it like there's converging lines. They may seem like they're parallel, but really there's lines that will converge, and the book ends before they totally converge. But you are able to sort of connect the dots, and there's a great blog post by a very interesting person in his own right, Aaron Swartz, someone from my hometown, in fact, who himself has a very interesting story, ended up committing suicide, much like the author of this book, David Foster Wallace. So that's sort of sad. And Swartz was a very interesting person, but the fact of the matter is that he wrote a piece called "What Happens at the End of Infinite Jest," or "The Infinite Jest Ending Explained" on his blog that you could look up. And it obviously don't read it until you finish the book, but it sort of explains the ending in a really interesting or a very clear, concise way that really just like blows your mind, and it's amazing. So yeah, I can't recommend this book enough. I will give it 5 stars. There's so many great things about this book. When I read it, I was like, I think I might have already said this, but like there's so many great stories in it that you feel like alone. I could make like a little like short film about like just one scene in this book because there's so many just beautiful, hilarious, unbelievably sort of deep things in this book. Yeah, I can't recommend it enough. I know it's kind of like a book that like it's kind of cringe to recommend it to say it's like your favorite book, but I really do really like it. I'm not very good at I don't have the best words. I'm not like David Foster Wallace. But yeah, I mean, the style of writing is fantastic. It's like so goofy and whimsical, but also sort of uh, cool in the way that he sort of, depending on who is like being focused on, will change sort of the style of writing. Like sometimes he'll be following like these Boston like drug addicts and gangsters, and drug dealers, and he'll sort of change the tone of narration, which is really fun. There's a lot of great sort of funny things that happen in this book, and David Foster Wallace's voice and just way of writing is miraculous. So yeah, that's me, Larry Red. One more big shout out to Jerry Blue for recommending this book. And I will see you next time. I've read some other books that I might review. I read them a bit back in the previous year, 2023. I read one of my favorites was To Live by Yu Hua. I think I'm pronouncing that right. He's a Chinese author. That was a really good book. I just reread The Secret History for a book club. Might talk about that. That's also one of my favorite books of all time. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. I've been Larry Red, and I hope you get better read, as in you read more books because reading is fun.